Welcome back, everyone. We're here for another round of Dream It, Build It, Make It, the series where we talk about the customer experience and all things marketing. I'm your host, Michael Heward. I'm a Senior Manager of Brand and Content Marketing here at Iterable, and I'm super excited. Today, we have the CEO of Faraday, Andy Rossmeissl. How you doing, Andy?
Doing great.
Awesome. So fun to have you here. Welcome, obviously. For everyone that's here watching, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys do at Faraday?
Yeah, sure thing. And first off, thanks so much for having me on the show. We're big fans of Iterable, and it's been it's going to be a real pleasure to talk to you today. Yeah. Faraday is the leading responsible AI platform for brands, including many Iterable users. So we help hundreds of brands predict their customers' behavior with respect and fairness. It's basically just a very practical application of the magic AI concept that directly impacts the bottom line. So brands can use Faraday to easily enable personalization, do lead scoring, optimize engagement, prevent churn, find new customers, things like that. We're little over 50% team in Burlington, Vermont, smartest software team in the state. I'm the CEO here and mostly just try to stay out of their way.
I think that's great. And I really like picking up on the respect and fairness. We definitely push that a lot in our marketing and our conversations too. So it's awesome to partner with like-minded folks like you guys. Cool. I love to start out with a question that really, I think a lot of times marketers and anyone in a brand focuses on themselves and their customers. But for us in particular, we work with customers that have customers themselves who are consumers often. So I love to ask you as a consumer, one of the things that Iterable is talking about these days is joy. Like there's a lot of not so joyful things in the world. So like it's you want an experience with a brand that's joyful. So for you as a consumer, what are some of the characteristics of a customer experience with a brand that like make it joyful for you?
I think starting with basics, good design, simple language that's what keeps me from like closing the tab, so to speak. In terms of something recently that I love about 2022, and I can't believe it's taken so long for this to happen, but being able to text a company that I buy things from. Yeah. I mean, it sounds so basic, right? And texting is so old, but I feel like it's just recently become like a thing that happens. And I know Iterable actually supports that. So thank you for being a part of that. But it's just so nice to just talk to a human and like, oh man, it's great. Love that.
Yeah, I think for too long it was the press Y to opt in or something like that, and then there was no response. You're like, well, great, I'm still talking to a robot. So it's cool to I totally agree. And whenever I get like an actual response that's in human language, I'm like, oh, this is what I wanted.
Thank you.
Cool. And then bring it back to you as you work at Faraday. What aspects of your job, like your job itself, bring you joy?
I'm surrounded by experts all day, and honestly, I can't help but to just learn new things all the time. Like I could try not to, and I still wouldn't be able to. And it's literally every day. And I think that's the greatest thing that anybody could ask for in the workplace. I certainly feel very lucky. Mm-hmm. The other thing is just, I think we're doing something really important at Faraday with our focus on responsible AI. Mm-hmm. And, that gives me the energy that startup CEOs need, to keep going every day. And it just brings me joy to know that's there for me every morning when I get into work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. You gotta have that kind of, as they say, that why, that purpose.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Exactly.
Cool. So let's dive into what you guys are doing a little bit. So let's like kind of lay the groundwork. Like, where are we at as marketers, as brands, with predictive analytics and AI, and how do you see these like currently impacting the state of marketing and personalization?
Yeah, great question. I think first off, I always try to start when people ask me about AI, my family or whatever. I always like to start off just saying it's important to understand that AI is like really profoundly dumb. It's capable of great things, don't get me wrong, but only through relentless trial and error, right? And this is something that people forget. It's something even, I forget sometimes. And, I think that's step one, right? And then going a little further, I would say, for better or worse, AI is like absolutely everywhere these days, right? I mean, we see it in the news, we read about it, we hear about it from friends. I think tools like scikit-learn, TensorFlow, some of you, may have heard about them. They've made it really easy for developers, even in some cases, non-developers with no formal stats background to, apply industry standard algorithms to whatever data they want to build, predictive models. And, I call them predictive models, but there's not actually a guarantee that they're actually predictive of anything necessarily, and then these same people can apply these models to any other data set they want and make predictions. And again, maybe they're not actual predictions, but they look like predictions, right? So I think the important thing to know about the landscape right now is, this convergence between relative technical immaturity combined with, I think very recently, broad accessibility to the technology puts us at a kind of crossroads, right? And if we go in one direction, we do things the right way. And I think AI is genuinely and even, massively accretive to our society's well-being and to brand performance, right? To speak to the crowd here. The other way, though, is kind of a nightmarish dystopia, and we can talk about that more if you want, but I think the word I would use to describe AI in marketing today is diffuse. And, there's obviously tremendous power. It's why we're seeing this explosion of tools, personalization, predictive features, really across the board, right? AI is the clear winner for doing personalization. It can score leads better than any other technique that I know of. It can assemble buyer audiences. It can predict LTV. It can warn brands about churn. It really is remarkable, right? But what we worry about at Faraday, and what I worry about, is the diffusion part of things. So all of these tools and features use their own implementation, right? And we try to keep track of which implementations we see out there in the market are good and which are maybe not. But honestly, it's quite overwhelming. Things have become so diffuse. And I think it's important to understand that many of the predictive models in actual operation out there, some of reviewers may be using models today that are probably not very predictive. And some of them may even have very serious fairness issues. And I think that's really the problem we're trying to solve at Faraday, right? That's why our clients use us. Another way I think you could think about it in terms of where we are at as like an industry right now is, imagine if every brand, right, when you're starting a new company, you got your website, you're building, you got your product, you're doing your market research and everything. And then imagine if every brand had to like build their own payment stack from scratch, right? Instead of using Stripe, that would be chaos. It would be horrible. People's credit card numbers are getting breached all the time. You'd be unfairly applying credit. I mean, it would be an absolute disaster. And, it sounds really wild, but that's kind of what's happening with AI right now.
And you're talking about broad accessibility. Is this something that you feel like is moving quickly, slowly? Like, are you like cautiously optimistic about it? Bullish, like fully optimistic about it? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the solution here is certainly not to lock it up, right? I mean, we started our company 10 years ago, and at the time there was not really a lot of accessibility. There were certainly tools, low level things, not very well documented, really required. There was just, I think, a sort of understanding that if you were dabbling, you had some good mathematical background. I'm certainly optimistic. I mean, I'm a hacker myself. I think that information wants to be free, and that, these tools should be broadly available, and that, you might as well encode the best in class algorithms as open source. And I think all these things are true. It's just that I think our cultural understanding hasn't necessarily quite kept up. And so there's a bit of a mismatch.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, you were talking a bit about like how these models are put together, and obviously that requires data and a fair amount of data. And there are a lot of data sources out there, and especially marketers of 0, first, second, third, millionth party data, all the parties, the data parties.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about how these different sources impact the use of AI?
Yeah. I'm waiting for fourth party. It's going to happen. Just watch.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, right. So, some people may already know this, but I'll just quickly explain that to do AI, you really need two different kinds of data. You need the first category we call label data, is the term of art. It's basically historical examples of the thing that you're trying to predict. So if you're trying to predict lead conversion, your label data would be all of your leads that had converted in the past. And this kind of data almost always comes from first party data. And it's crucial. It's a requirement for doing, the basic foundational kinds of AI that we do at Faraday. The second kind, and this is a little more complex, is called feature data. And this is basically a fairly random collection of various things that we know to be true about the leads in the past, but also all kinds of other people that we may want to make predictions about in the future. And the feature data doesn't necessarily have to do anything directly with being a lead, right? It could just be everybody's favorite color, for example, would be a fine piece of feature data. And feature data can come from really anywhere: 0, first, second, third party. It's important to really understand that for many applications, for some of the most powerful prediction applications that we support Faraday, and just generally speaking in the market, third-party data is actually essential. Because you're trying to make predictions about, say, leads or other people where you haven't had the time or opportunity to obtain 0 party, first party, second party data about them.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to make any predictions about these people at all, you have to have some feature data about them, and the only feature data you can get is third party. Now, you can also get features from 0, first, second party data that can be valuable in some cases, especially down funnel customer engagement, things like that. In fact, we've repeatedly found at Faraday over the last 10 years of being a company that it's really the combination of the first party data and the third party data that gives the best results. I will mention, you talked about providers. It's something I have to note is that a lot of the third party data you can find out there is garbage.
Right.
And not even just garbage, but a lot of it is sourced in a way that we feel is deeply irresponsible. So it's powerful, and it is actually not just powerful, but in fact essential for many applications of AI, but you really do have to be careful with where you're getting it from.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a good point off that is like the third party is often related with cookies. And so you talked a little bit how third party was used, but obviously there's changes coming with third party cookies. So how do you see that impacting it, since first and third are so important? Like how do you see the changes to third party cookies changing this aspect?
Yeah, so cookies were invented in 1995, and they were invented for an e-commerce platform, right? So from the very beginning, they've always had a commercial purpose. And it honestly didn't even take a year for people to start worrying about privacy implications. We're all talking about them today, brands especially. At Faraday, we made the decision 10 years ago. We've always had a policy against identifying customers with cookies. Our rule internally, just to kind of break it down to something simple, is that we only identify people using identifiers that they, one, regularly share, and two, can recite from memory. And I bet, Michael, you probably cannot recite any of your tracking cookies from memory. At least I hope not.
No, so, I would have had to look at them yesterday to do that.
So, things like address, phone, email, all of us with homes have an address on the outside.
Yeah.
And, that's great. We think that's a very legitimate identifier. We've been feeling it this way for 10 years, and we're glad that our society, and now even, parts of big tech, are coming around to the idea that tracking cookies are creepy and they should probably go away. At the end of the day, Michael, I would just say that we're all going to have to get used to the idea that people are going to have to identify themselves before we can identify them, and that seems like it should be obvious, right? And I think the fact that when you say it that way, it does sound obvious, that I think it's good evidence that it's the right thing to do. Yeah.
I mean, that's great. I think that's a good delineation of, like, if the person can quickly remember it, then it's something that they're okay sharing. I think that's a good way to think about it. Are there any other kind of tips that you'd give for marketers looking to find a way to personalize without necessarily using cookies?
Oh yeah. Oh God, Lord, there are many better ways to personalize. I mean, I have a hard time even calling that kind of thing personalization. I call it regurgitation, right? It's like, I mean, it's probably happened to you, but just the other week I needed a staple gun, and I was like, quickly went online, searched for where I could buy one around me, went down to the hardware store, bought one. I don't care about staple guns. I never think about staple guns. I will only ever buy one in my life. But now I see ads for staple guns. I see ads for office staplers. I see ads for stomach stapling. My phone is like showing me articles about how to choose the right stapler and like construction industry news, and the fact that I once needed a stapler says nothing about me as a person. Right? That's not personalization, right? I think we at Faraday believe that to do personalization right, you have to know and care about the person. So for me, it's always useful to think like, okay, what's the ideal situation, right? So the absolute best way to do personalization, I think, of course, would be to personally know all your customers, right? In many industries, it's important to remember that many industries still work this way, right? So you're friends with a real estate agent. They may know you for years, ask you about your kids. Oh, you got a new job, thinking about maybe a bigger house, like that kind of thing. That's still a legitimate, valid way of doing business. And obviously, though, at scale, you can't do that. And most of Iterable's users don't do that kind of thing, which is why they're using Iterable. And Faraday, I would say, just makes it incredibly easy to use Iterable for real, meaningful personalization. And it works like this. We use AI along with all of the rich, responsibly sourced data we have on virtually every adult in the US to take their customer base, however big it is, and to algorithmically organize them into a very small number of coherent, interesting groups. We call these groups personas. And then Faraday just assigns everybody in your database every day to one of your personas. And you can now, as a brand, produce, variations of your content for each group that really speaks to the actual holistic profile of each persona. And then you use Iterable's dynamic content features to merge in the right version for each recipient. That, in our mind, is really personalization.
Yeah, no, 100%. We've talked about it a lot internally, and then sometimes on the blog that my team writes it's contextualization. It's finding the context that the person is in, incorporating real world situations and context to understand exactly what they're doing. Also, I'm very excited for the staple gun ads I'm about to get because my phone is right. So, thank you.
Right. That is not my context. I am not a staple gun enthusiast. So yeah.
Yeah, I've got Google over here just hearing the word staple. Ready.
Great.
So you've been using some strong words like fairness, responsibility, and in your prediction engine, you exclude certain data points. There's no like race and class, et cetera. Why is that? And like, why is that so important to do so, especially nowadays?
Yeah. It goes right back to what I said about, AI being dumb as nails, right? I mean, if you remember when I was talking about label data, right? All these algorithms have to go off is the past history. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that history isn't perfect. It's deeply biased for many reasons, including that large groups have faced and continue to face systematic discrimination over many years. And AI is not smart enough to recognize that some of the patterns that it finds in this historical data are because of injustice. AI doesn't know what justice is. It doesn't know what injustice is. And left unmanaged, AI is going to notice that these patterns exist. It's going to use these patterns to make predictions. It's going to do that over and over and over again. And in the process, it's going to create new historical data for new algorithms to use, right? You're perpetuating these patterns forever out into the future. It would just go on and on and on. And it's not doing this because AI or the algorithms are malicious or evil. It's doing it because it's dumb, right? And so this is why, at Faraday, we're worried about the diffusion of AI implementations out there, building models, making predictions. That's the easy part of AI. People who, fail to take the other steps, grooming your data sets, controlling for bias, evaluating models, they're not malicious or evil people. They're just busy. Mm-hmm. and they don't, frankly, know any better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. It's a strong point. I wish it was the last question I have. I do have another one. It was like, it's such a good point then. Like really pushing people forward and not be scared of AI, but like just kind of help it be a little bit smarter. It makes sense. Like you when you get a data set, you're not going to look through everything. You're busy. Like that's what the AI is hopefully for. It's hopefully to help you parse it out and make it easier to use. But no, it makes total sense. So looking at the future now, I like to finish with an optimistic, predictive. Just tell us exactly what's going to happen. I know you're completely omniscient about this. So in this future of cookie-free world, bias-free AI, how does that look for the modern consumer? Like what impact is that going to have? How will I notice it by interacting with big brands, small brands, any brand?
I don't really have my heart set even on being bias-free, like you say. I mean, I think some brands and products are intrinsically biased toward, say, women or toward younger people, right? It's not necessarily bad, and that's not something that we need to eliminate. For me, it's more about, and this is the future I'm looking toward, it's more about bias being a part of the conversation, right? Knowing it's there, being thoughtful about it. The ideal for me, frankly, is a brand looking at, say, an audience that they want to target and being able to clearly see if and how it's biased. And, if you're surprised by something there, doesn't make sense, there are straightforward, well-documented ways within the machine learning practice that you can mitigate that bias. And you could, use Faraday to do that, or whatever your AI process is. And some brands, I think this is really exciting to think about, some brands may even want to invert the bias and contribute to an equity process that starts to maybe right some historical wrongs. I think what's really compelling about the future is giving brands information and power to understand and act on bias. Moving to an equality model or even to an equity model may actually, may not want to hear it, but it may actually suppress performance in the short term, but I think there will be, and I look forward to it, I think there will be brave brands out there that see longer term potential, that there's going to be a payback. And, based on the choices brands make around this performance versus fairness question, will actually, as kind of economists here, start to be able to see a price tag on fairness, which is a really, I think, going to be an enlightening moment for the industry that we work in. And, I have a lot of hope, honestly, that brands, given the right information, will actually do the right thing, even at a cost, because they believe it will pay off in the long run in a lot of ways, for themselves and for the society as a whole.
Yeah, short-term loss, long-term gains. No, I really like that. I've spoken to many people on this series that have values-driven brands, and I think Faraday is a great example of that. You guys are doing awesome work, and it's actionable and tangible. It's great to see.
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much for this. Was very enlightening. I know I'm not a technical person, so AI to me is like this is like a far off thing. So it's really fascinating to learn all about this. I'd love to open up the floor for you. If our viewers have any questions, how can they reach out to you or anyone else in the team at Faraday?
Yeah, and thanks so much again, Michael, for having me. If people are interested in getting some help with this stuff, they can find us at Faraday.ai.
Awesome. We'll put that in the link below, somewhere in the file below. And then we'll see you guys soon. But again, thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate it. And to the rest of you guys, I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one.